Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this video we are going to talk about the next topic. There are two more topics which is generic topics before we jump to the APIs is how to write the entities, how to define the relationships, and how to play with the type ORM transactions. Okay, these concepts exist in each and every ORMs, like either you talk about the Prisma, Sequelize, defining the migrations, running the migrations, defining the transactions, and defining the relationships in the Prisma schema or in the type ORM entities and all. So here we are using users. I want to talk about a simple use case of, let's say, restaurant. Let's say you are just building a food ordering platform. So here we'll put all our entities and let's play with them. So what do we have here is we have the restaurant, and we can have the other entities like restaurant, restaurant dish, and restaurant address. And we will see how these three entities can be related to one another. Okay, so one is the restaurant, which is about the restaurant. Okay, then restaurant dish, which contains the menu items, and then restaurant address, that is about, okay, what is the locations, and because that can have multiple attributes, geo coordinates, the physical address and all. So we have these three different tables. We will try to define the associations like address in the restaurant will have 1 to 1, address and dish will have 1 to many, because one restaurant can have multiple dish menu items. Like if you talk about any Swiggy, Uber Eats, there you see the multiple restaurants, and when you go to the single restaurant you can see the multiple categories and multiple dish menu items. There can be restaurant category, dish menu category, then we can have another complexity, but simplified way is restaurant, restaurant menu, and the restaurant address. These three entities, we will see how we can define the relationship between these. Okay, so we already know how to create entity. I can just copy this one here. So what I need to create is restaurant entity. And I will stop my application, otherwise it will start creating the tables right away. So what I'm going to create is restaurant entity.ts. Another entity we are going to create is restaurant dish and restaurant address. And then final entity we have is restaurant address. These are the three entities. We just need to define, okay, how the restaurant look like. So first of all, a simple restaurant entity will have a ID, name, description. Let's say these are just some simplified attributes. I'm using some example which I have already covered just for this demo. So let's say this is the restaurant table, like ID, name, description, and these are just like a basic properties. And similarly we have another entity which is restaurant dish and restaurant address. We'll just keep changing the names. Restaurant addresses, restaurant dishes, and the restaurant entity. We'll change the names: restaurant dish entity, restaurant address entity. Okay, it will be, let's say, ID, city, state. Restaurant dish also has a name, description, default columns. We'll have a like ingredients. Okay, what is the dish menu items, what is the category. It can be, it can have lot more data, right? Because it can have thumbnails, cuisine type, meal type, food type. Let's populate some of these in the dish. So these are just a worker column. Okay, and we can have these two default columns created at and updated at all these entities, because these are coming from TypeORM. It will populate the created at and updated at attributes, columns in your tables. Now restaurant entity. Restaurant will have a primary key that will act as a foreign key in the restaurant dish because it's a one-to-many relationship, right? One restaurant will have multiple dish menu items. So the thumb rule is we are just going to use these annotations one to many and many to one. One to many from restaurant to dish, and inside a restaurant dish we will write many to one annotation. So from restaurant, here we are going to define the type, that is one to many, right? So here is one to many and it is pointing to restaurant dish entity, and how they are linked. Both these entities are linked through this object. So there is a event dot restaurant. Inside the restaurant dish we will create this, okay, and this is public dishes, and that is of type restaurant dish entity of type array. And inside the dish entity, sorry, this should be inside restaurant entity. This is one to many, right? One restaurant will have a multiple dishes, and just import this dish entity. And now what we need to do, we will go to the dish entity and then we will define the join column reference. Here we need to use many to one, right? Many dish menu items will point to the one restaurant, and it is referring to the restaurant entity. What happened? Restaurant entity, and this event, which particular attribute or property we are referring, event dot dishes, right? And here the name is public restaurant. Here if you see, the property you put is a restaurant, so same we need to use it. So this is just like thumb rule. Once you write it, you understand, okay, this is how you need to define it. And here you can also add a join column that will be act as a foreign key, and so that TypeORM will not put its own custom name for the foreign key. So the name is restaurant ID. So this will be created as a foreign key, and reference column is the ID in the restaurant table. So restaurant ID will be a column in the restaurant dish table that will be referring to the ID column of the restaurant table, which is the primary key, right? You don't need to put semicolon. So this is simple, right? One to many and many to one. This is how you define the relationship. Similarly, if there is any other table, this is how you can manage the relationship across the different tables. Okay, so similarly in the address table also we can do the same, because address will be one to one and there will be a join column. So here instead of this I will just do one to one, which will be pointing to the restaurant entity. I will import it, and the name is restaurant entity, and this is a join column, and this is restaurant, right? Simple. In the one to one you don't need to specify anything inside a restaurant entity, because, or you can specify the simple segment restaurant entity one to one restaurant address entity. Okay, so main focus is here is on many to one and one to many. These are the annotations we put it with a join column. Okay, now when I start the TypeORM, I mean when I enable the migrations and enable the synchronization, and when I start this application, then we will be able to see the columns created and the tables created. So when I added these entities in the db module.for root, these are the entities we have, right? Now I have added the restaurant address user. This is the restaurant dish entity and the restaurant address entity, right? So I think I lost that SQL. It has generated all the primary key, foreign key relationships and all, and I can see that in the database also. You can see restaurant addresses, and here you can see the relationships, restaurant dishes. So this is the restaurant, okay? Now the restaurant dishes, it has this restaurant ID relationship Similarly, the restaurant addresses, it has this relationship. So this is how we can create the tables from the entities. That's very simple, and we are using join column, so the column name will be not a custom one but the specified columns by restaurant ID. Now how do I write the migration for this for the production? I already got the tables. I will extract the table create SQL. I will put the migration create and put that in the migration file. Then when I push this code on the production, migration run will execute, and all these three tables will be created through the migration files, not by this dbsync utility. Okay, so this is how you specify the relationships in the entities for the TypeORM.